Well, it's here. Artificial intelligence, especially in the form of ChatGPT. ChatGPT, so the buzz goes, can answer any number of questions. Type in a question about, for example, why was there an American Revolution? And ChatGPT will, drawing from its ever-expanding database, offer a sensible, documented, detailed essay by way of an answer. Naturally, teachers and professors are scrambling. How will they use ChatGPT? How will students use it, for good or ill? Can it be used as a teaching tool, or is it inevitably going to sideline the teachers? These questions are urgent and legitimate, and we at Take on the South want to engage them. To that end, Take on the South is launching a mini-series we've decided to call Southern Seance, AI Meets Southern Studies. Part tongue-in-cheek, part serious curiosity, Southern Seance asks famous deceased Southerners through OpenAI, ChatGPT, the free version, about their thoughts on the South. But to test just how reliable AI and ChatGPT is, we need human expertise. And so, for every famous deceased Southerner we interview on Southern Seance with ChatGPT, we have a real-life human expert who will judge AI's efforts. So is it a matter of AI stay in your lane, or hang on, AI is doing something useful, interesting, and accurate? Or a bit of both? This is our inaugural Southern Seance, AI Meets Southern Studies interview, and there will be many others. But today we are interviewing Elvis Presley, surely one of the most iconic Southerners. Elvis died in August 1977, but today we bring him back by using ChatGPT. Our living expert to critique and evaluate AI's handling of Elvis as Southerner is Grant Wong, a graduate student in history at the University of South Carolina, who is a specialist in 20th century popular culture. Grant, welcome to Take on the South.
Thanks, Professor. It's good to be here.
Well, I really am very grateful for you doing this because, we do need to check ChatGPT, and you're the person to do it in this instance. I think the best way to handle this is for me to read what I asked ChatGPT, and then you and I can go through what it spat out. And you can tell us what it got wrong, what it got right, just evaluate it, right? So you're judging ChatGPT. So for people who haven't used this before, essentially what you can do is type in any question to ChatGPT, and with astonishing speed, it will spit out an answer. And the more detailed you make the question, the more detailed the answer is usually. So here's the question that I wrote for ChatGPT, the OpenAI version. I said, write a script for an interview with Mark Smith, host of Take on the South podcast, and Elvis Presley, detailing how and why Elvis understood himself as Southern, how his upbringing in the South influenced his music, food tastes, and religion, and examine how he thought of his music as Southern. And here's what it spat back. It sets it up. It says, introduction. The set is prepared for the interview. Mark Smith, the host of Take on the South podcast, sits comfortably in his chair. The camera focuses on Mark as he begins the interview. So what we'll do, Grant, is I'll read my bit, you read Elvis, and then we'll have a chat about what happens. And bear in mind, everything we're reading is AI generated. We're not adding anything, we're not editing. This is pure AI ChatGPT. So Mark Smith, he begins, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Take on the South. Today we have a very special guest with us, a man who needs no introduction, the king of rock and roll himself, Elvis Presley. Elvis, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here.
Elvis, you are often referred to as a cultural icon, especially when it comes to the South. Can you tell us a little bit about how you understood yourself as a Southern artist and the influence your upbringing had on your music?
Well, Mark, being from the South, particularly from Tupelo, Mississippi, had a profound impact on my life and career. The South is a place with a rich musical heritage, and growing up, I was exposed to various genres like gospel, blues, and country music. I loved the soulful melodies and the heartfelt lyrics, and I wanted to incorporate those elements into my own music.
And how did your Southern roots manifest in your music? Can you give us some examples?
Absolutely, Mark. If you listen to my music, you can hear those Southern influences shining through. Take songs like That's Alright or Blue Suede Shoes. They have that unmistakable blend of rhythm and blues with a touch of country twang. I wanted to create a sound that was uniquely Southern, a fusion of different genres that spoke to people's hearts.
That's fascinating, Elvis. Now, in addition to music, food is another aspect that is often associated with the South. Did your upbringing influence your taste in food as well?
Oh, definitely. Southern cuisine has its own charm, you know. Fried chicken, biscuits, and gravy, collard greens, those are the flavors I grew up with. Whenever I had the chance, I would indulge in those classic Southern dishes. Even later in life, I always had a fondness for the food that reminded me of home.
It's incredible how your roots permeated all aspects of your life, Elvis. Now, moving beyond music and food, religion is also a significant part of Southern culture. Can you shed some light on your spiritual beliefs and how they intertwined with your identity as a Southern artist?
Religion played a pivotal role in my life. I was raised in a devout Christian family, and gospel music had a profound impact on me. The heartfelt lyrics and the sense of hope and redemption resonated deeply with my own experiences. My spirituality was always intertwined with my music, and you can hear it in songs like How Great Thou Art or Peace in the Valley. The South's religious traditions gave me a sense of purpose and guided me throughout my career.
Thank you for sharing that, Elvis. Finally, as we wrap up, how did you personally think of your music? Did you consider it to be inherently Southern?
Absolutely, Mark. I always saw my music as a reflection of my Southern roots. I aimed to capture the spirit, the passion, and the diversity of the South in every note I sang. Whether it was the rock and roll energy or the soulful ballads, I wanted to create a sound that was uniquely Southern. The South molded me, and my music was my way of paying tribute to the place that shaped me.
Elvis, it's been an honor having you on. All right, so that's what ChatGPT offered in response to my query. And now, Grant, you know a lot about Elvis. You know, you're a specialist in popular culture. As we read that together, by the way, I thought you were almost Elvis twang like that. I mean, just hinting at it. As we read that together, what's your basic takeaway from what ChatGPT can do?
Right. So I think it's important for us to kind of first critically think about what ChatGPT does and how it actually functions, right? Like I'm not a tech expert by any means, but I find that labeling it AI while correct can be a bit misleading, right? It's kind of like a glorified word search that will take information from the internet and assemble it based on the prompt, right? So that lends itself to the kind of weird tone of this interview. It's kind of slightly off, right? From at the technological level, right, what's important to note is that this isn't generating a real person who has real thoughts and is articulating them into words, right? This is an amalgam of stuff written about Elvis, or rather text about Elvis online, that it's then like puzzle piecing into this interview, right? And I think another thing that's important, right, and this is important if we want to think critically about ChatGPT and history, what this is doing is presenting us with a kind of timeless Elvis, right? You know, in a normal interview, you are interviewing a real person in a specific time and place. Of course, you're different in your 20s versus your 30s versus your 40s. This is especially the case for historical figures who developing interesting ways over time, right? So what's interesting here is that we're not actually interviewing, say, 1950s Elvis or 1960s Elvis or 1970s Elvis. We're interviewing weird AI Google-generated Elvis, right?
Which is transcendent, right? Like he's the same at all times.
Oh, yeah. And that's one big thing that strikes me about this interview. Unlike more egregious examples that have been documented with historical figures being interviewed by ChatGPT, none of Elvis's interview responses are like really wrong on the face, right? Yes, his music is this genre blend. Yes, he likes Southern cooking. He was a poor white Southern guy. This is what he ate, right? Same thing with religion. He was raised Pentecostal, right? And he had kind of this complex conception of spirituality and religion, right? But it's all very surface level. You can make the argument that Elvis wouldn't reveal many of these inner depths in say, an interview during his life anyway, but it's especially clear when we're looking at ChatGPT.
Yeah, I think I mean, obviously, as you read this, it flirts with being comical, right? Because it's so predictable, and then throwing in a couple of specifics is designed to obviously make you think it's legitimate. So he tells us where he was born. He gives us examples of his songs and what have you. It just reminds me of a kind of very average, undergraduate essay in which you're answering the question, but really at no depth, right?
Right. And of course, the responses to the questions in the general text are like correct writ large, right? But it does miss some important nuances, right? For instance, ChatGPT has AI Mark Smith calling Elvis the king of rock and roll, which famously is a title that Elvis rejected, right? There's an important anecdote where he's at this 1969 press conference in Vegas. Some journalist calls him the king of rock and roll, and in response, he points to Fats Domino, right? A prominent black artist in the background, and he's like, nah, he's the real king of rock and roll. You can make the argument that he's referring specifically to Fats Domino or to like black culture at large, right? But he doesn't abide by that title. Same thing with, those little examples you point out, right? He's saying, oh, look at songs like That's All Right or Blue Suede Shoes. I'm blending rhythm and blues with country. That's not technically wrong, but as we also know, Elvis didn't really write his own material. That's All Right is from 1946, blues singer Arthur Big Boy Crudup. Blue Suede Shoes is from his rockabilly compatriot Carl Perkins, who also recorded at Sun Records, right? So it is kind of weird to see this AI Elvis talking about how he blended music together in songs that he covered.
That he didn't write.
Right, and of course he added his own performance style with it, but it's not Elvis that's making That's All Right or Blue Suede Shoes rock or country. The songs are already recorded like that. Yeah,
no, I think it's an excellent point, and something that I'm guessing that when ChatGPT harvests this information, I don't know how it does it, those kind of details are much more difficult to access for the technology, and so it just passes them over, I'm guessing. And that's what lends it this kind of superficial feel to it, right? Okay, so it's superficial. It's not getting you deep. What are but it's not bad, right? I mean, let's just think about this for a second. I'm typing in a question, and if you haven't seen it, people listening to the program haven't seen it, you should watch what it does. I mean, it basically it generates it very quickly. Okay, with seemingly no effort. It's immediate. Your gratification is satisfied straight away. You don't have to wait for an hour. It does it straight. It's real time, and it's grammatically correct, right? Its vocabulary is not inadequate, and it's kind of up to the basic task. There are no real mistakes as such. It's nothing egregiously wrong with it. But I suppose the point is there's nothing really great about it, right?
Right. I think the main takeaway, at least in this application of ChatGPT, is that we have to remember, regardless of how well ChatGPT does a thing, it is essentially derivative because of how ChatGPT works, right? It is not generating this knowledge from nothing. It's taking it from sources that already exist. And of course, we don't know exactly where it's getting this stuff, right? I mean, compared to something like Wikipedia, right, that has flesh and blood editors who will argue with each other for hours over how a thing is presented, right? It's imperfect, but it gets a lot of the basics done, right? This is even at one step of removal where it's an automated technology sorting this stuff out, right? And I won't say it doesn't have its merits, but in terms of talking genuinely with people who have since passed, I don't think it's the best.
Yeah, right. No, I'm with you 100%. So, I'm a professor. You teach. You're going to be a professor. How should we use ChatGPT? Should we be worried? I mean, is this going to be helpful? What are your thoughts on this?
Honestly, I think the best way to tackle this in the classroom, at least, is to really be honest about what ChatGPT does and what it can do, right? I mean, if we're thinking about, say, students cheating on essays, right? I feel like an important response would be, I'm not asking you to write the essay so I can have the essay, right? I'm a professor. I know this stuff. I'm not looking for the end goal, right? The goal is to really get you thinking, right? I mean, the same kind of applies to this, right? This is kind of useful as a thought exercise, right? Us historians can often get caught up in our own academic debates, right? Which are important. They advance our scholarship and the state of the field, but they might not necessarily be the same kind of questions that everyday people have about Elvis, right? We can't expect the public to have read all of our literature, right? So in a way, unpacking the interview like this is helpful in that because ChatGPT is kind of organizing this lowest common denominator information from Google search, it lets us kind of hit at the historical basics of what makes Elvis Elvis and kind of plumb the depths there. Of course, the important thing is that we're specialists and academics looking at this critically. This would not fly if we printed out this interview and started using it in research.
No, it wouldn't, and you're entirely right. So maybe this is an audience question, right? So for academics, it is plainly lacking. For a general audience, it might be quite interesting, but it's not going to really serve students very well. It's too superficial, right?
Right.
So if you could add something that would be, I mean, what would you add into this interview from Elvis that because of your research that would actually do a better job of answering the question that I posed originally?
Right. And I'll say that, funnily enough, I think it kind of makes sense in a kind of roundabout way that the interview is kind of surface level and fluffy because, that's often the nature of celebrity interviews.
Yep, that's true.
But I do think that the stuff sidesteps what makes Elvis very historically and culturally interesting, right? For instance, we don't have here that he was a pop culture freak who listened to all manner of genres, right? Rock and roll was a combination of rhythm and blues, country, black and white artists. And we don't quite get that here, aside from him saying that his covers are mixtures that, he really liked, right? We don't have, the kind of context of his life, right? We see this a little bit in the food and religion, but I find that Elvis makes a lot more sense of a human when you think of him as, a poor white guy over in the South who struck it rich and really didn't know how to deal with it, right? Or even, the stuff that makes him culturally interesting, right? We don't have anything about his performance style, his hip shaking, right? What is he actually, adapting in terms of this music? Here he's just saying, I just mixed the genres. In real life, he's doing these covers of both black and white artists that end up ridiculously popular because Elvis is putting his own personal spin on it, right?
Yeah.
And we just don't have that here. And we also, of course, we don't have that sense of time. We don't know if this is 1950s Elvis, 1960s Elvis, 1970s Elvis, right? So we're not seeing specifics in regard to, say, his work with Sun Records versus his later work. We're not seeing what he thinks of Vegas or the Aloha from Hawaii special. We're not seeing what he thinks of his movies, right? So we're getting this very surface-level Elvis. It's not entirely wrong, but we're really not getting that much from it.
No. All right, that's very helpful. Anything else you want to add about this interview, such as it was, or I mean, what's your kind of takeaway? Should we be concerned? Should we be contemptuous? Can we use it? Any concluding thoughts, I suppose, Grant?
Honestly, right, Professor Smith didn't ask me to say this, but I think the right way to tackle this stuff is by doing series like these, right? By kind of critically engaging with the material, right? I mean, I could summarize all my thoughts here as, yes, ChatGPT bad and, doesn't work for this, but that's not going to get us anywhere.
Right.
It's not going to work for us academic specialists to be culturally contemptuous of this stuff, right? But neither should we uncritically embrace it, right? In a way, ChatGPT goes far beyond this, right? I think of the current strikes going on in California with the Writers Guild and the actors, right? So clearly this is a technology that we have and are going to have to deal with, like it or not. We ought to face it head on and really just critically think about it in an open and honest way.
I couldn't have put it better myself. Astute, helpful. Grant Wong, thank you for being on Take on the South.
Thanks. Too kind.